Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Cali Culture Podcast, episode 10, featuring returning guest Pete Moreno Jr., a former Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Marine Corps, is an author as well as an entrepreneur. Pete joins the show today to discuss a variety of topics, including self-defense, current safety issues and risk in Colombia, and situational awareness while in Colombia. You definitely don't want to miss this show. It's going to be a good one, ladies and gentlemen. So without further ado, episode 10, listen and enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to the Cali Culture Podcast. This is the only podcast on air that discusses everything about Cali, Colombia. We have another great show for you today. This is episode 10, and we have a returning guest that was on episode 3 that is going to join our podcast today. And we're going to have a great discussion in regards to safety, in regards to some recent tragic current events that's happened in Colombia. So without further ado, let's bring our guest on, Mr. Pete Moreno Jr. Welcome, Pete.
Hey, thanks, Jeremy. It's good to be back.
So I say welcome back, Pete.
Yeah, definitely. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. You were on episode 3, and we had a phenomenal show where we discussed a lot of things that are current, even as of now. Obviously, there's been some recent tragic events that have happened. One very recent, within the past 2 weeks, that happened to a young man who was a American Airlines flight attendant. His name was Eric Fernando Guterres Molina, and he had a layover in Medellin. And unfortunately, he decided to go out with some coworkers. They met some unidentified people at the bar, and unfortunately, he left with them and went missing. And unfortunately, his body was found 5 days later. This is a very, very sad tragedy, Pete, and it's been happening way too much. Um, First of all, I want to say on behalf of everyone here at Cali Culture Podcast, we send our deepest sympathies and condolences to this young man's family. To be only 32 years of age and lose your life, just wanting to have a good time and party, unfortunately, is very, very tragic. Pete, these things have been happening way too many times, and we don't have all of the facts yet, although police, Colombian authorities do believe that it is foul play, and they do believe that some sort of drugging was involved. But we don't have all the facts yet, so we can't speculate. But what we can do is we could talk to other travelers, people that are thinking about going to Medellin or anywhere in Colombia, really anywhere in South America in general, and give them some words of wisdom. For those people, guys or ladies that are thinking about going out, Medellin or Cali or Cartagena, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice that I would give to them, and I'll just give it to you straight, no chaser here, Jeremy, is, and it's really intuitive because this is something that we learned as kids. Don't talk to strangers. Don't take candy from strangers, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between being social and then, leaving the party to go to the after party with people you don't know. And knowing that what we know about Colombia, we know that those after parties usually turn into druggings, homicides, express kidnappings, things of this nature. So, you're not in your local neighborhood, you're not in the local, watering hole, wherever it is you came from. And unfortunately, a lot of people, and I would say especially Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers. I mean, this young kid, 32 years old. I mean, naturalized U.S. citizen, came up in El Salvador, born and raised. You have a comfort zone with the language. You have a comfort zone being from, broader Latin America, where sometimes you think you're immune to this. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned in the first time I was on the show. Like I said, hey, I don't want to be too hard on my Puerto Rican bros, but even military guys, right? Native speakers, fell victim to this same thing. And it comes down to complacency kills.
Yeah.
Being complacent will get you killed.
Yeah, absolutely. To that end, why do you believe that Americans in particular are so complacent when you go to these countries, whether it be a developing country or what's considered a third world country? Why do you think Americans are so complacent, knowing the crime issues we have here in our home country? But then we go to a different country, perhaps a developing country, and all of a sudden completely let our guard down, going out to bars, getting drunk, acting crazy. Why do you think that is? Is that a cultural thing, or is it just something that that this generation does?
Well, this phenomenon in Colombia, it's been going on for decades.
Hmm.
So I think part of it is it's just a different environment.
Hmm.
And I have plenty of friends from, Colombia and just, Latin America in general that always tease me. And they're like, Pete, your country's probably more dangerous than mine. And I'm like, yeah, depending on where you go, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It really comes down to where you go.
Hmm.
But the dynamic is just different. You're in another place. And I think a lot of folks, in the US are, whether they want to admit it or not, they're sheltered or they have been sheltered. They're used to their neighborhood. They know that probably somebody's not coming out with a machete. They know probably someone's not going to stick them with a knife, in their local neighborhood because they know the environment.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is, the unknown. And that's why it's important to have some semblance of a framework on how to navigate the unknown.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and when tragedies like what happened to this young man, Mr. Molina, unfortunately, when they happen, what I've noticed is a lot of Americans and Canadians and Europeans seem to get scared straight for like a 2 minute or a 2 month period. For 2 months, they don't want to go anywhere. They don't want to go out of the country. They don't want to go to a bar. They stop drinking because they're literally scared. It shakes them. It rattles them.
Yeah.
And then after that 2 months, it's like, okay, let's go to Mexico and let's go out and get drunk and not have a plan on how to get home. And let's go out and meet some women we don't know anything about them, and bring them back to our Airbnb. The same reckless behavior they fall into. And I think that's terrible. Why do you think that happens? Why do you think we as Americans, we hear about a tragic event and all of a sudden, we're scared straight for a little while, but then we revert back to the same reckless behavior?
Well, I think there's two things going on there. The first part of it is human nature. I mean, if you have any, semblance of intellect, let's use the analogy of a car accident. You get in a car accident, you're a new driver, you may be scared to drive again after that, right? You're going to have that angst like, oh man, I got to watch out what I'm doing, that sort of thing. The other part of it is, I think goes right back to complacency.
Right. Absolutely.
It goes right back to, it's not going to happen to me.
Hmm.
I'm not the one. Another analogy, unfortunately, people on motorcycles. Oh, I'm a great motorcycle driver. Nothing's going to happen to me. Right. Yeah, you probably are a great motorcycle driver. But guess what? When you get broadsided by the 18-wheeler that plowed through the light, right, you're dead.
So true. That is so true. And just to add to that, I am one of those people that, I thought I could get on a Suzuki Gixxer motorcycle and drive crazy. I wouldn't say I was driving crazy, but I could have been more cautious. And I dropped the bike. And, unfortunately, or fortunately for me, it was only, a little bit of a road rash, but it could have been a lot worse. So you're
Absolutely.
exactly right. Complacency is the number one thing that gets people in terrible situations. And really, that's really what's the essence of your book slash manual. Colombia nightlife is don't be complacent. Use situational awareness. Don't get blackout drunk. What was things like this that happened recently? Was that your motivation for writing your manual?
Yeah, that was a lot of the motivation because, as I mentioned in the first podcast, a good buddy of mine, his cousin had been, drugged and killed down there in Cartagena.
Hmm.
Right. Then, of course, I saw all the stuff on social media. And then, of course, I lived down there for 3 years and, you hear these nightmares. But, I never got rolled, not
Hmm.
once. Right. So,
Hmm.
really, it comes down to having a framework. And, I know you're a martial artist, Jeremy.
Hmm.
And, just like with martial arts, you have certain ways that you're going to react to certain situations
Right.
and it becomes muscle memory.
Hmm.
Same thing with this. When you're really drunk at 2 or 3 in the morning, you're surrounded by strangers, you
Hmm.
think you may have been drugged, what's the next move? If you've never been exposed to this environment, if
Hmm.
you don't know what the actions are that should be happening on the objective, so to speak, right? On site
Right.
at that moment, you're in a compromising situation. And
Right.
you might be getting walked right out of there to get robbed or killed, like
Hmm.
this young man, unfortunately. So it
Right.
comes right back to having some sort of strategic framework, a holistic framework
Hmm.
to help you get through this.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And when you were on the podcast last for episode 3, you really gave a good breakdown of your book slash manual for men that plan to go to Colombia and then experience the nightlife. There's absolutely nothing wrong with going to Colombia and experience nightlife, but you got to do it in a way where it won't get you in a bad situation or unalive. And so, for those viewers that have not seen or read your book, Pete, I definitely want to put it on screen in a minute. I want you to sort
Okay.
of give a brief synopsis of the book, and well, it could be brief or not. Just give a synopsis of your book and why it is imperative for men that are thinking about, well, men and women actually, but men in particular, because so many men to go to Medellin and Cartagena, why they need to go get this book immediately.
Okay. Be happy to do that. All right, Jeremy. So, Colombian nightlife. Everyone can see this on the screen. So, really, the book. It's not a book in the traditional sense. It's not a novel. It's not something that needs to be, read cover to cover. Like I say, it's meant to, look at and run it fast. Essentially, get the information you need to get and use it. So whether you're on the plane, whether you're at the airport, whether you're ready to go out, there's something in there for you. The book contains 9 protocols, okay? And each one of these protocols, or the first 7 protocols actually, I have what's called the transgression of the protocol, which is a nightmare situation that happens. Someone getting killed, someone getting drugged, something like that. That's followed by a case study. Okay, hey, look, this is what happened. And then that's followed about, here's what you do to mitigate that. Okay, so in that sense, it's very solution oriented. The last 2 protocols, 8 and 9, they talk about what to do if you find yourself in a situation, right? Like you've been drugged, you got arrested by the police, and then Protocol 9 goes into how you are going to deal with the U.S. Embassy, phone numbers to call, things of that nature. The last part of that, Jeremy, is there's also a supplemental book to this. It's called the Nightlife Operations Toolkit. And that toolkit is available on Amazon. If you're a Kindle subscriber, it's free. And it's just pure information and checklists that you can actually screenshot, download, print, whatever you want to do. So you have this information, at your fingertips. And then of course, all this stuff comes in, digital formats and print. But that's the crux of it, man. It's just a framework on how to keep your ass out of a sling.
Which again, it is this book is definitely written for the times because things have been happening way too much with Americans and Canadians, going to Colombia and Mexico and not coming back, or in some cases not even coming back whole, So I would highly recommend for any viewers, if you're a man, you're thinking about going to Colombia, go ahead and buy this book. The book, what, Pete, is $20, 18, $20?
Yeah, I mean, it's depending on what platform you buy it on. So, Apple Books, which is the author's edition, that's a little more robust. The foreword's by former combat vet, retired Colonel Santiago. He's also an attorney. That guy is just a wealth of knowledge, and he put some bonus material in there for me that goes above and beyond those protocols that are extremely helpful. And probably would have, or could have, saved this young man's life had he at least had awareness about it. So back to your main question, yeah, Apple Books, Author's Edition, $19.99. All the other stuff is on Amazon, the normal edition, the Author's Edition, the Nightlife Operations Toolkit. And the standard edition is $9.99, the digital one. And then the paper copy is $14.99. So it's accessible.
Absolutely.
And the cost of the drink, right?
Yeah, exactly. You read my brain there. Literally, for the cost of a beer in America. In fact, you might pay, with the tip, you might pay a little bit more for a beer in America. You can have this book, you have the digital version, or for a cost of 2 cocktails, or maybe even 1 cocktail, depending on what city you live in, you can have the paper copy. And it is good to have. I have my copy, and I've been going to Colombia for years and South America for years, but I have a copy because it's always good to remind yourself of safety practices and things that could happen. There's a lot of good information in the book, in the manual. It tells you what could happen. That's what you need to understand is what could happen.
That's right. And going back to that, I think that martial arts analogy that I'd mentioned earlier, and how we train in the Marine Corps. You have to always be prepared.
Right.
You never know what you're going to get hit with.
Absolutely.
You don't know if there's a right hook coming at you.
Yep.
If there's a knife coming at you, right? You need to know what sort of action, how you're going to respond in that situation. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure ultimately.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And speaking of martial arts and self-defense, you're right in the fact that, yes, I do teach self-defense. I do teach martial arts. I'm very passionate about martial arts. I've been in it all my life. But I do know that there is a sort of a mentality, and it's mainly, I believe, in America and Europe, well, in Canada too, but it's a mentality that, okay, I study martial arts, I train martial arts. So if I were to go to Colombia, or if I were to go to Mexico, or if I were to go to the Dominican Republic and somebody pulls a knife or a firearm on me, I can simply just take that knife. I could try to fight the person, take that knife, and then it'll be just like the movies. Pete, tell us why it is never a good idea to try to engage with someone, with a criminal that has a firearm or a knife or a machete.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you well know, Jeremy, and it's widely known, I think, in most circles, military, combatives, etc. If you're in a situation with a knife and you attempt to disarm that individual, even if you're highly trained, the probability of you getting slashed or stabbed is very, very high. Right. And depending on where you get slashed or stabbed, you can bleed out right there on site.
Yes.
So why on earth would you even put yourself in that situation? So the answer to that is very simple. Exit stage left, right? Get the hell out of Dodge, whatever you want to call it. Leave, run. Unless you're and of course this is Hollywood, right? Unless you're like we were talking about offline, unless you're Jason Statham, one of these movies.
Right.
And even that stuff's staged, or John Wick. you shouldn't be engaged in that. And even if you are highly trained individuals understand that you should avoid conflict at all cost
That's right.
because there are implications. You're going to get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
You may be detained in that country indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
You will be viewed probably as the aggressor because you're highly trained and you could have left the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to disengage.
Absolutely. And that is self-defense 101. That is what I teach. I try to emphasize that is disengage, de-escalate. And that is why it is important not to get blackout drunk, ladies and gentlemen. De-escalate. Don't escalate the situation. If somebody's in your face, slowly back, de-escalate, talk in a calm manner. Because if you can de-escalate the situation, you can prevent yourself from potentially getting hurt. You don't know who that person has with him or her. You never know.
That's right.
There could be 20 people in that bar and they're waiting for you to jump that guy or to do something to that guy. And then they're waiting for you. They have guns and knives, they're waiting for you. So it is very important. Yes, rule number one, de-escalate the situation. Rule number two, to remove yourself from the situation. And then last, very last but not least, is you might have to fight for your life. But that is a very last resort.
Yeah, that's the last resort. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Pete, I found that in most cases, and I've had my share of bars and clubs that I've been in. In most cases, you can de-escalate the situation. I know a lot of people, they say, well, I had to punch them or I had to do this. In most cases, you can de-escalate the situation just by how you talk, just by your body language.
You're absolutely correct, and I'll add to that. And you got to forgive me. I can't remember which of the great Stoics said this. I don't know I can't remember if it was Marcus Aurelius or Aristotle or Socrates, but the quote goes something like, not everything requires a response.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right.
You cannot respond and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's insulting you, you can choose not to respond.
That's right.
And this is where you have to let your ego, get out of the way, get out of your way, and not be a hazard to yourself and everyone around you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other part of that, Jeremy, is we talked a little bit about, what happens if you're at knife point or gun point and they're trying to take you out of the club.
Right.
To isolate you.
Yeah.
One of the interesting points there, and I recently saw some data on this from the FBI, is that if you are removed from the primary location, right, whether that's your vehicle, the nightclub, the hotel, your probability of being, killed it goes up exponentially. So the survival rate goes from, okay, I may get stabbed or shot to now I'm being removed out of this situation.
Right.
Okay. And I have a very low probability of living. And, in looking at, what happened to this young man at American Airlines, he left the venue with the other coworker. Now, we don't know, and we don't want to speculate, but we don't know if they were perhaps drugged already and led out of there, right? Or they decided, hey, we want to go to the after party at some obscure location.
Right.
And this is where the book comes in handy. You have to understand, you have to know how to handle that situation. And even if you don't read the book, you got to know. Everyone has that kind of sixth sense. They have that instinct. Hey, this isn't right. And you can say no. And it's important to be able to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing about it, the thing I love about your manual, Pete, is it is literally, you can apply those principles, those safety practices abroad or here in America. If you're in a nightclub in America and it doesn't feel right, leave. Get out of the situation. It's the same principle, no matter where you are.
That's right. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some nuance, obviously, because it's Colombia, and they have some interesting ways of the criminal groups down there have some interesting methods for incapacitating you. But at least if you're aware of it and you know how to navigate it, you're going to be in a much better place.
Absolutely. I agree. We were talking about the potential, and this has happened, by the way, in Colombia. In fact, a couple of years ago, it happened to an Asian American that went to Medellin. Obviously, he was trying to meet up with a young lady, and he was kidnapped. Pete, he was kidnapped. Obviously, they wanted a ransom. His family couldn't provide the ransom in time enough, and they literally tortured this young man. And obviously, they unalived him. But the fact of the matter is, he was in some undisclosed, location, probably in the mountains somewhere,
Right.
literally being tortured. And so,
Yes.
can you help the viewers understand that you never, ever want to be, like you said, leave with somebody to an undisclosed location, or physically put in a van or a car and taken away from that location? Why is that like the worst thing that could possibly be done? And then, obviously, and then, before you answer that question, obviously at that point it is a life or death situation. But
Yeah.
why is it so important for that person to stay and just literally try to fight for their life?
I mean, if you leave, whether you're half drugged or you're leaving voluntarily with people you don't know, you're effectively, as far as I'm concerned, and this is based on data, right? This is based on these actual stories that are occurring, unfortunately. You're signing your own death warrant.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
Right.
Okay. And, one of the chapters in the book talks about this. And there's a 1-page, protocol that you can just look at, and it'll tell you, like, hey, I think I've been drugged. What should I do? Well, one of the things you should do is you need to stay in a public area that's very well lit.
Right.
Seek out the security, stay with your friends. Do not let anyone remove you from that location, unless it's emergency services, right? It's the police, it's the paramedics, or what have you. Because the minute let's say you've been drugged and you're just getting worse,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's a downhill spiral. And then next thing you know, you don't know where the hell you are, and you're dead.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why
And,
you don't do it.
no, you're exactly right. And just to add to that again, just the unfortunate circumstance of what happened to this young man, Eric Molina. Unfortunately, he was found, I believe it was 50 miles away from the bar that he originally went to, and he was found in a creek. I don't know if it was in the creek or on the creek bank, but he was found he was found at a creek. And so that tells me that most likely he probably was drugged. We don't know all the evidence and all of the facts, but he probably was drugged and then dumped off to some location, some other location, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about that, and it looks like when they left, it said, at least in one of the reports that I'd read, and I tried to get smart on this, obviously, try to be as factual as possible about it, but it mentioned that they went to like an Airbnb, right? So, maybe it was for the after party, maybe it was to get laid,
Right.
for more excitement, if you will.
Yeah.
And then the situation deteriorated, from there. And it's just, I just can't reiterate how unfortunate that is. But this is why you do not talk to strangers. This is why you do not take shots from strangers. And it's all the stuff we know. It's all the stuff we're taught as kids, right?
Yeah.
Don't talk to strangers. Don't take candy from strangers.
Right.
Stay where you are. You're going to be good.
Absolutely.
It's pretty intuitive. But the problem is people lose their minds,
Yeah.
and especially in Medellin, or I would say in Colombia in general. I mean, the women are so beautiful,
Yeah.
right? They're
Oh,
so
yeah.
beautiful. Like one's more beautiful than the next. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem is some of these women are predators, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So you've got, or they've got predator gangs that are
Right.
behind them.
Yeah, no, you're
And
absolutely right. And unfortunately, like I said, it's happening way too much. It's to the point now where um, it's to the point now where if people don't wake up, then I don't know what will wake them up. But I definitely want to emphasize something you said, and that is, don't let them take you out. Don't let them take you and put you in a car or anything like that. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, at that point, you do need to fight for your life. You need to grab whatever object you possibly can and literally fight for your life. A lot of you know that I was a cage fighter for almost 6 years. And, the difference in that type of fighting, in cage fighting, is at the end of the night, whether I win that fight or lose that fight, I know I'm going to walk out of the cage and go home. In that particular fighting scenario, you don't know if you're going to walk away. And so you literally have to fight for your life. And that's why it is important to know martial arts or some sort of combat fighting systems. It is good to, because at that point you have to be reactive. So people, please keep that in mind that there is a point in time where you can't de-escalate, you can't control the outcome. It is literally a threat against your life, and you have to act accordingly. You have to fight for your life. So I just really wanted to make that point. Pete, did you want to add anything to that?
yeah, I think the thing I wanted to add to that is, there's a lot of people out there that aren't trained. They don't know what to do. The most important thing is to not leave, to make a ruckus, make a lot of noise,
Right.
Yell, scream, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you believe your life is being threatened, as you and I both know, there are things called weapons of opportunity.
Right.
A weapon of opportunity could be a pen or a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, it's a sharp object. I'm
Right.
not going to do a how-to, on your show, but, there's a lot of different things you can do, right? The same thing with a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to, protect yourself in dire sorts of situations, especially if someone's got a, gun at you or a knife and you can't get away.
Absolutely. Yep. Well said. So one of the things that I've noticed is the passport bros, I guess, as they call them, passport bros are starting to get a lot of heat, particularly in Medellin, Pete.
Oh, yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of passport bros that are getting searched at the airport, that are getting turned around. Like you can't even come, you can't even proceed into our city. And I, I think it's, I really do believe that there is an initiative to not necessarily clean up Medellin, but maybe change the narrative and change the image a little bit. You could sort of see it with Colombian authorities. My question to you, Pete, is: do you think this whole passport bro movement is coming to an end, or is this just a phase of we're going to crack down on them a little bit? We're going to try to get the some of these pedos that we know are going to Colombia. We're going to try to get some of the guys to just exploit the women. Do you think this is a phase, or this is like here to stay?
I think it's here to stay, because nobody likes that. And
Right.
I know that Colombians especially do not appreciate, as much as they may love the tourism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's generating revenue and people are making money, they're not going to tolerate their women being exploited.
Right.
So I definitely believe there's a paradigm shift. I think it's here to stay. And I think those guys are going to be in a situation. So I think, as we discussed in episode 3, it's about having the right tourists.
Mm-hmm.
And so, these individuals that are traveling to Colombia to exploit women, they should be turned around.
Yeah, I agree.
They should be placed in handcuffs. They should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to see the Colombian authorities doing that. And that you can still go down there and have fun,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's about having the right people down there having fun. Or having sending a message, and I think this is what's happening with the Colombian authorities. They're sending a message like, hey,
Right.
this isn't a place to come like exploit our people. We're not going to tolerate it, and we're going to turn you right around, as they should. So
Absolutely.
I think it's a good thing.
No, I agree. I 100% agree. It's a good thing. Colombia is a beautiful country, and people go there for a lot of times for the wrong reasons. But a lot of people don't even realize that there's two coasts. Colombia is surrounded by two coasts, Atlantic and Pacific. A lot
That's
of
right.
people don't realize that there's a percentage. I think it's about 8% of the Amazon rainforest is in Colombia. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of things to do besides the nonsense, fellas. If you guys are thinking just about that, it is apparent Colombian authorities are cracking down on that. And I even read an article, Pete. This was recently, within the past 2 weeks, that I guess a young man, I say young man, a guy went to, uh, he flew into Medellin airport. They searched his bag, and he literally had rubbers. He had condoms, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
guess
I
a
saw that on the
of them,
news.
and
Yeah,
they turned him around.
yeah. I saw the same thing on the news. I'm like, oh man, this isn't good. The guy had basically like, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it looked like he had a damn suitcase full of condoms. It's like, come on, man. They
Yeah,
have pharmacies down there. You can go, you can take care of yourself and be safe if that's what you're doing, right?
absolutely.
But yeah, it's a little much.
It's a lot much. And let me just also emphasize, Pete, I know you're going to agree with me. For those, um, I won't use a word I want to say, but for those men, those men that should be locked up, they're going down there to prey on young women, underage women. They should be arrested and extradited to the U.S. or just leave them in Colombia, leave them in the Colombian jail. But
Yeah,
there's no way that should be going on. And so,
right.
um, if there's any viewers that you fit in that category, first of all, I don't want you anywhere near my podcast space. And the
That's
second
right.
thing is you should definitely be prosecuted to highest extent of law because that is just wrong
That's right.
to prey on young underage women. And we know that happens, Pete. We know that
Yeah,
happens.
unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, it happens all over the world. And it's, I mean, we see it all over the news. And unfortunately, a lot of these individuals are not held accountable to the
Right,
extent they should be.
right.
You know, yeah, I don't want to go on too much of a rant about that, but yeah, we're in, as we say in the Marine Corps, we are in violent agreement on
Right.
that point. You know,
Absolutely.
and this goes, just to digress, for a moment, going back to the book, right?
Hmm.
I mean, this is for, and we touched upon this in episode 3. You mentioned a lot of women said, "Hey, why is it just for men?" It's not. It's not just for men.
Hmm.
It's for men and women. It's for travelers in general,
Right.
right? And it covers an amalgamation of different scenarios
Hmm.
that you could find yourself in, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to emphasize that point, actually, ladies that are looking at this podcast now, this book is also for you. Columbia Nightlife by Pete Moreno Jr. is also, that book is good for you. The manual is good for you. And so I would highly encourage you all to go out and buy it as well, whether it be the digital or paperback copy. Go out and buy it as well because everyone, whether you're male or female, young or older, need to understand situational awareness. You need to understand basic principles of being safe in Colombia. There's a lot of solo female travelers that are interestingly going to Colombia
yeah,
by themselves, traveling, hiking, going out by themselves. I think it's interesting.
yeah,
I I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's risky,
yeah.
And I would say if you're going to do that, definitely get this manual because there's some things in there that are directly applicable to you as well. It can keep you safe. Unfortunately, we just have to be honest and transparent and real. Women are going to be the target, especially if
That's
they
right.
see a woman alone at the bar,
Right.
particularly married. They're going to know that you're American right off the bat
Right off the bat.
and you're going to be a target. And so you're going to be a target more than the American guy,
Yeah.
So that's just the way it is. So definitely solo female travelers, we do not want to hear an incident about something that happened to you all. Take care of yourself, get the manual, and follow the manual by all means.
That's right. Good point, Jeremy.
Yep. Now, Pete, there's something that I think that I don't think we really touched on this in episode 3, and I definitely want to touch on it. The fact that you know a lot of travelers go to Colombia, whether it be Medellin, Cali, Cartagena, Santa Marta, and they don't know that there are estratos. I think that's how you say it. Estratos, which are
Right.
different
The social
sections of the
classes.
city.
Right.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yes, sections of the city, and the lower numbers from 0 to I believe it's 3 or 4 are sort of the how do we say this politically correct, lower income
Just
neighborhood
right. Right.
areas,
Yep. Yep.
and then the higher from like 5 to 7 is the
Hmm.
more higher affluent areas where it's going to be less crime, more
Hmm.
tourists, more resources in regards to police and security guards. And so, if you're traveling to Colombia, you need to know these areas. Could you just shed a little light on that, Pete, is in regards to how a lot of people go to a city and they don't know the geography of the city, so they end up in a bad location. Maybe not purposely, but they just end up in a
Right.
bad location because they don't know where they're going.
Yeah, I think most of the time it's on accident or by
Hmm.
accident. And I think some of it is on purpose out of curiosity. But it's like with any city. I mean, people that come to Miami, they
Hmm.
generally congregate at Miami Beach
Hmm.
or, downtown Miami on Brickell or some of these other, iconic parts. Now, you can come get lost in the hood and get yourself into a big problem,
Yeah.
you know. Same scenario with Colombia. So it would behoove you, if you're a visitor, to do your research. You can go to any number of resources out there. I mean, I don't cover the social stratum, in the book,
Hmm.
but generally speaking, if you don't want to find trouble, you want to be in nicer areas
Right.
as a general rule of thumb. The
Hmm.
other thing about it is when you're in generally nice areas, I'll use Bogota as an example.
Hmm.
They are not going to put up with the shenanigans from the criminal element
Yeah.
or from tourists,
Right.
right? So that's something to be cognizant of.
Hmm.
But I heard this on social media too, and I made a comment, I think, on Instagram. Someone had mentioned, hey, is Pereda going to
Hmm.
turn into Medellin? And my comment, very gently, but I'll be a little bit more coarse here, is, the people that live in Pereda, they have a way above average financial means,
Yeah.
wealth, and they do not tolerate, they will not tolerate the nonsense that's going on in Medellin.
Hmm.
Like, they won't let it happen. And it
Hmm.
will be, maybe it'll be a bloodbath of sorts. You,
Hmm.
you get me? So it's
Yeah.
sort of like, if you're going to go to the nicer areas, you need to conduct yourself accordingly.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I would say very close to the same thing in Cali. The interesting thing about Cali is Cali and the surrounding areas, they can be, I would say, slightly higher crime areas than some of the other cities, but it's concentrated to their crime. In other words, what we saw in Cartagena, where those Americans that went to that nightclub and were fighting outside the club, that's not a good idea to do it in Cali
Oh,
at
right. Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You might not walk away.
Yeah.
So you have to know your surroundings. You have to know the city. You have to know the stratos. You have to know exactly where to go in order to stay safe. Now we do have a comment that I want to bring up, or actually a question from one of the viewers I want to bring up, and we could both talk about this one. Pete.
Okay.
Let's see. Issue. I think I'm saying his name right. It says, how can we better leverage local insights for safety travel experience? I think he's saying basically how can we take input from locals, or whether it be news or whether it be just a discussion, and apply that for our own travel safety. And I guess our meaning like tourists, travelers, expats, and immigrants.
Yeah, so I'll take that on a little bit, I
Hmm.
think. So I think the important thing there, issue, and first of all, that's a great question, because it's always important to understand, what's happening on the ground. Now, I'll caveat that with you need to be getting your information from a reputable source.
Right.
That would be the local news, for example. That's one of the things I talk about in the book. Is you need to get information from reputable sources. I don't know where you're from, Ishu, what country, but most countries have, I don't know, maybe your country has an embassy, in Colombia, or a consulate. They usually put out, security information. Usually it's a little bit more stringent. It'll scare people a lot of times, but I think it's better to be over aware than to be under aware. I would not take anecdotal advice from social media. I would not take it from people you don't know, because they could be feeding you information to be getting ready to feed you to the lions, so to speak, right? Let's see. That's what I have to say on that issue. Make sure it's reputable.
Yep.
You want to get the facts. Maybe maybe the travel agency that you worked with to get your travel package down there. I know there are a lot of, or not a lot, but I know there are companies that will receive you at the airport. Make sure those are reputable and vetted. You don't want to get picked up by the guys that are going to rob you. That sort of thing. So you got to do your research. But part of doing your research is you have to have some sort of perspective or point of view. Like you gotta, like, in a lot of cases, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So part of helping you to understand what you don't know is, not to plug my book too much, but part of it is, know the general landscape of what you're dealing with. And then from there, you can start making decisions. And the book points you to a lot of these sort of, areas where you can make decisions, or to resources that can actually be helpful to you. Hopefully that answered the question, issue. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have anything to add there.
No, I 100% agree. I think you answered perfectly. Make sure it's a reputable source. Make sure you're not listening to anyone, but at the same time, don't try to go on your own inclination, what you've heard in the States or whatever your own country is. Don't listen to that, because that just could be propaganda. So
Right, exactly.
You want to make sure is reputable. But at the same time, like, you want to get some good sound advice. So
That's right.
absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
one other thing I wanted to add there, Jeremy, sorry for
Mhm.
cutting you off there.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to add there is, the first thing that everyone should be doing with anything you're doing in your life is seek first to understand. Whatever you're doing, seek first to understand.
Right.
Once you can do that, that's going to help you navigate almost anything.
Yeah.
I mean, not to oversimplify it, but,
No, you're exactly right. That's seeking you shall find. I
Yeah.
try to understand what you're getting into. When I was younger, I did. There was a few times I would go to. I think it was actually even El Salvador. I went to El Salvador really with not knowing a lot about the country or the
Right.
area, and it's not the smartest thing to do.
Oh
You
no,
know?
El Sal was a hot place back then, man. I was there in the very early 2000s before Colombia.
Right.
And it was the wild, wild west. I mean, today it's obviously a much different story.
Yeah, it's definitely cleaned up. Their president has done a really good job of cleaning up the crime and corruption. So, absolutely, yep. Now, I was going to well, actually, before we go on, I did want to remind the viewers that if you do want to donate to the show, small donation, perfectly fine. There's the donation information is on the screen there. Set Venmo, Cash App, Zelle. So, ultimately, our goal, we want to keep the lights on and keep this good podcast going. And so, with your help, we can absolutely do that. So, any small donation is much appreciated. Now, Pete, back to you. So, do you believe, and I asked this question in episode 3, but I think it's so important, I'm going to ask it again in this episode, and that is, uh, these dating sites that these guys keep getting on to meet women. Why are you vehemently? I know you're vehemently against it because I remember episode your response to episode 3. Why is it not always a good thing to use these dating apps, whether it be Tinder or Bumble or whatever?
I mean, we see it over, in case people don't understand, we see it over and over again in the news, tragedy after tragedy. Man hooks up with, this, just gorgeous woman, via Bumble or Tinder or whatever the heck it is, and invariably ends up drugged, robbed, and sometimes killed. So if you know that, if you seek first to understand, right, you should very quickly come to the conclusion that probably not a good idea to do that. Now, if you are going to do that, there are some guardrails on how to do that, and I speak to that in my book. Okay? So, if you insist on being on the, dating apps, which I do not recommend, and I overtly state that in the book, there are ways to sort of contain the situation. And I go into detail on what to do and how to manage that, because it is manageable, but it's not recommended. But again, people are going to do what they're going to do. and you can't fix, you cannot fix stupid, but you can definitely have a framework on how to manage it.
That is so true. Yeah, you cannot fix stupid. That is 100% true. So, definitely, another saying that we say in Mississippi, you can only bring a horse to the water, to the well. You can't make him drink.
Yep,
So,
I've heard that one. That's right.
So this is the opportunity where this is information, this is inside knowledge, this is free game for the ladies and the men that are listening to this. Um, I want to ask this final question. I know what the answer is, and this even applies to me, by the way, but I want to hear your input. Okay. For those travelers or expats that are not bilingual, that are or additional languages challenge, I'll put it that way. Why is that not a good thing to consistently go to different countries and not be able to speak the language?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things here. The more languages you speak, and especially the local language of wherever you're visiting, even if you only know a little bit of the language, it's a sign of respect to the locals.
Right.
And as we know with Colombia, they're some of the most hospitable, nice people that are going to take you in and accommodate you. The criminal element, right? They're some of the most ruthless, people you'll run into too. Okay. So speaking the language, I think from a pure, respect point of view, even if you can't pronounce the words right, it's gonna be well received. The second part of that is, if you're running around in a nightlife situation and you're doing high risk activities and you don't speak the language, you can be getting had by the guy and girl right next to you because they're talking about how they're going to hem you up. Right in earshot of you. And you're smiling and nodding like, oh yeah, I understand. Yeah. And then you're gonna get it.
Yeah.
you're getting murdered later that night.
Yeah.
So to your point, Jeremy, it's for your safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's for your personal safety.
Yeah.
You want to be able to communicate. Like, what if you get drugged? You need help. You need to be able to ask for help. Hey, what happened to you? Oh man, I don't speak. Well, how are you going to explain that? So,
or you're incapacitated trying to pull out your Google Maps.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's important to the extent that you can
Right.
try to learn the language. And Spanish isn't that difficult of a language to learn. I mean, most people here in the U.S., they're forced to take it at some point, a language in high school or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with all the different softwares out there, you got to be able to communicate. And I think even if you don't speak or you refuse to speak, there's apps that'll do the real-time translation for you. But there's nothing like understanding what is happening
Right.
in real time.
Yeah. That is so true. I 1,000% agree with you. It's something that I'm really working diligently to learn. I speak some Spanish, but definitely not even close to being fluent. And I find myself understanding more than I'm able to speak. And that is important because you're exactly right. Somebody could be plotting against you right on the side of you or right
Yeah.
behind you. And,
Yes.
and you don't have a clue. Not have a clue is the worst thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is the worst thing. That's the definition of getting like blindsided,
Mm-hmm.
Literally.
Yeah.
The other part of it is too, right? Beside the language, and I can't remember if we talked about this in the podcast, but you don't want to be conspicuous. You want to be inconspicuous.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want to be obnoxious.
Right.
You try not to stick out to where they're like you become a target.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'll tell you, leave that when we talked about this in episode 3, and I know you remember this. Leave that tough guy image or that tough guy attitude, leave it in the States or in Europe or Canada,
That's right.
wherever your home country is.
That's right.
Not going to fly in a different country. They might smile, they might even laugh, but
Right.
at the end of the day, no one likes that kind of attitude, that tough guy, I'm better than you type of attitude.
Right.
And so
That's right.
you could be around good people, and they might will look out for you.
Right.
But your attitude, they're like, okay, well, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, it's 100% true. To be able to understand, at least speak a little bit, at least be able to agree. And I did want to touch on that just real quick. I know we're running out of time, but that is so true in what you said, that I find, particularly in Cali, that when you could just speak a little bit, when you even try, people really appreciate that. The locals really appreciate when you can at least try. Hola, ¿cómo está? Like, at least
Right.
speak.
Yes.
Okay, well, he can't, he doesn't know much, but at least he's trying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll give you, not to digress too much, but an example of this, outside of the Spanish language, I was at dinner with some people from Bangladesh, and I do not speak Bengali. And, the food kept on coming, et cetera, and of course they speak English. However, at the end of it, I wanted to say something to them in Bengali. So thank God for AI. I got on my perplexity. I'm like, hey man, what would be appropriate in this situation? Obviously when they weren't looking around, rehearsed it in my head a few times, and I said it to the husband and wife, and man, they were beside themselves. They're like, what? Like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
Like, and you said it pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But that goes a long way, because in the end, no matter where we're from, this is humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the human business.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you can interact with people in a respectful manner, generally it's going to be well received. Unless you're dealing with some animals that want to kill you, in which case, get the book.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. Get the book one way or another. Get the main one way or another. I did want to mention this. Just came to my mind. I don't think I mentioned this in the previous podcast that we did episode, and that is, you know, you got to think about it in terms of if somebody was an immigrant here, right? If somebody was an immigrant here and they asked, do you speak Spanish? And if you said no, and then they continually, you don't speak Spanish? The first question, the first thing in your mind would be like, wait a minute, you're in America. You should be able to speak English. It's the same way on the other hand. It's the same way on the other foot. If you go to Colombia and you ask, hey, do you speak English? And they said no. All right, well, just leave it at that.
Right. They probably do. You know, almost every Colombian that I've met speaks English or they can understand. You know, so if you're going there, you should have like at least be able to say, hey, how you doing?
Exactly.
Good evening. Thank you. Something like that. It goes a long way. Not to beat it to the horse, but it goes a long way.
No, you're exactly right. Well, we reached our time, Pete. Obviously, it's always good to have you. We're going to do more collaborations too.
For sure.
In regards to podcasts, we have a lot to talk about in regards to South America, Colombia in particular. So definitely, it's been a pleasure. Another great episode, and I know the viewers took a lot of good information and input that they can apply in their travels, or even if they're thinking about relocating to Colombia or South America. So thanks again for being on the show, Pete, and I will talk to you very soon. Actually, you know what? Why don't you just give us some final words before we close out? Give us some final words.
So final words. Well, it's Easter, so Feliz Pascua, right? Happy Easter to everyone out there. It's always great to have a discussion with you, Jeremy. I hope that the audience is, benefiting from this information. And Jeremy and I are both at your disposal. We're available to talk further beyond the platform if that's something people are interested in. And, just big shout out to your podcast, you and your podcast, Jeremy. Humbled as always, man, to be a guest, to be your guest. And, that's all I got, man. Happy Easter on that note.
Absolutely. Happy Easter, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. I did want to remind you all that I do have a martial arts seminar next Saturday, a week from today. Mark it on your calendar if it's not already on your calendar. It's going to be Saturday in Cali at the Park de Pelo, which is dog park in the San Fernando area. It's going to be started around 11 o'clock a.m. Colombian time, and then we'll probably wrap up a little just afternoon. So this particular martial art, it is a Filipino martial art. It is based on open hand strikes and defending. It's based on the stick or baston, and it's based on the machete and knife fighting as well. So it's knife fighting, attacks, and defending as well. So very applicable, very relevant to to if you're a traveler, if you're a tourist, or even if you're a local too. It's relevant and good. It's a good martial art that you can add in your toolbox. If you're already a martial artist, you can add it to your toolbox, and it will definitely help you. So I hope to see you there. Until then, please have a wonderful day. Remember, Cali is Cali. Let's embrace the culture. Let's respect the culture. Let's love the culture. Cali is a place to be. Have a great day. See you the next time.
Take care.
Thank you for watching the Cali Culture Podcast with Jeremy Preston. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next week for our next episode.